rules. Money rules. Money. Welcome to the Money Rules Podcast, where we tackle your personal financial matters with leading financial advisors. Your host, Boitumelo Ntsoko.
Today we're tackling a subject that many find emotionally and administratively challenging, separating your financial affairs after a divorce. Eric Jordan, a certified financial planner at Crew Invest, joins us on this episode to walk us through this process and offer tips on how to ensure you end up on a better financial footing. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Tumi. Thank you for the opportunity.
Before we start, please don't forget to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, share this podcast with your friends, and download our episodes for easy listening on the go. Eric, after a divorce is finalized, it seems crucial to draft a post-divorce budget. Can you explain why this is important and what factors should be considered?
Yes, a lot of the times post-divorce, it is really a splitting of that budget that you had prior to the time. And that often depends on your change in living arrangements, as an example. So where there's previously were one household, now suddenly there's two households. And then you need to take into account factors like what was determined in the settlement agreement. So certain costs might have been decided to be paid by one spouse, other costs by the other spouse. There may be maintenance payments that needs to be made. So all of these are factors that points towards the need to almost start afresh with a budget and understanding what your new circumstances would be and what those financial implications is going to be on a monthly basis.
And for those who have debt, this can be a significant issue post-divorce. How should individuals approach managing their debt?
So especially debt that was there prior to divorce, the settlement agreement needs to clearly stipulate exactly how those debts need to be determined and which party is responsible for those. But then when post-divorce, when there are circumstances when you need to incur certain debts, it's very important to take into account your new budget and understanding exactly what the purpose for those debts are, again, what your cash flow circumstances are and how you will actually manage to make those repayments on a monthly basis, ensuring that it doesn't lead to further hardship down the line.
Just staying with the topic of banks and loans, obviously sorting your banking after a divorce can be a daunting task. What steps should one take to ensure a smooth transition?
Yes, often where there's joint accounts and the like, it's important to, as early as possible, to start by setting up either if you don't have your own accounts, set up your own accounts. And then from a practical perspective, understanding which debit orders will continue to run from which accounts and make sure those debit orders, as an example, is transferred to the correct account. And then often something like internet banking, getting those things set up, understanding how internet banking works, how linking of accounts works so you can transfer funds from different accounts. All of those are things that might be new to the individual. And as soon as they can start learning those ropes as soon as possible, that would be better.
Moving on to personal insurance, what should individuals consider when updating their short and long-term insurance?
Yes, so regarding short-term insurance, it's important to understand that often that is linked to first of all, who holds that short-term insurance. So it might have a need to have a new short-term insurance taken out. So that's potentially the first thing to have a look at. Secondly, is there's a change of residency, the place where you live. That has a definite impact on your short-term insurance. Those schedules need to be updated to make sure that you have the correct street address, as an example. There might be different security at the new house, so that might have an impact on the premiums. And then also what the content is. Now, obviously, previously that short-term insurance was covering all household content. After the divorce and the split and the dividing of the assets, it has an impact on the value of household content. So important to update those. Regarding long-term insurance, again, it's important from a financial planning perspective to understand what your future risks and liabilities might be and what needs to be covered, especially from a life policy perspective. If you had a joint life policy, you might need to understand what goes into splitting that life policy, and there might be underwriting consequences. So there's various aspects that you need to take into account, and it's quite important to thoroughly go through those issues with a financial planner.
Eric, healthcare coverage can be quite complex. What steps should we take regarding medical aid and gap cover?
Yes, so medical aid gap cover is probably one of the most important aspects that you need to make sure that is well covered, especially post a divorce where you are no longer a member or dependent on your ex-spouse's medical aid. It's important that there's no break in membership when you are post-divorce where you have your own medical aid. That's extremely important because if there's a break in membership and that break is long enough, it might result when you want to go onto a new medical aid that there might be some exclusions or waiting periods, etc. So it's very important, firstly, that there's no break in membership, so there's a smooth transition. And then secondly, as well, that you're on the correct plan type because there potentially are no less dependents. Your medical requirements might be different to your spouse's. So there might also be a need for a change in plan type.
Retirement funding is a huge responsibility post-divorce. What options are available for individuals who are awarded a portion of their ex-spouse's pension interest? And are there other retirement planning considerations they need to take into account?
Yes, so post-divorce, where you are awarded a portion of your ex-spouse's retirement fund, you have the option to either receive that benefit immediately in the form of a cash payment, but that will have certain tax implications on that. Alternatively, you can also look at preserving that payment into another retirement fund, which often is tax neutral, so there's a benefit from that perspective, and it then allows you to have that funds growing for your eventual retirement in future. Another thing then as well is to really start afresh with your retirement planning and understanding what your new budget would be in retirement, what your own provisions are, what your own savings abilities would be, and almost rerun those numbers again and start a plan afresh so that you have a clear goals that you are working towards for your own personal retirement.
Eric, we know estate planning is also vital, especially after a divorce. How soon should individuals update their will and what considerations should they keep in mind?
Yes, so from a will perspective, it's obviously very important to update that as soon as possible. The law does provide for if a person passes away within 3 months of a divorce and you haven't updated your will yet, there is an assumption that you wanted to amend your will to no longer leave assets to your ex-spouse. But once that period has passed and you haven't made a change to your will and you pass away, then that will be given effect to as it stands. So it's very important to really go through your estate planning again, make sure that your will is updated, and further to that, where there are children involved and you need to make provision for guardians or testamentary trusts and there's trustees that you would like to appoint, it's a good time then to just rethink those individuals who you'd like to appoint for those very important duties.
Let's talk about personal matters like filing legal documentation and updating your marital status with Home Affairs. What steps should be taken here?
Again, it's being proactive in updating your marital status with Home Affairs, as an example, is always a good thing because that might prevent you having to run into problems at a later stage when you need to apply for certain documentation like passports, etc., and your marital status has not yet been updated, or even where there are potential inheritances and your marital status is not clear. So it's important to do that proactively to prevent that having to run around at a later stage when there's a lot more urgency. Then also thinking practical things like thinking about, do you want to change your surname as an example? That would necessitate obviously a change at Home Affairs as well to update those documents and make sure that things are correct from the start.
Eric, lastly, are there any other final tips that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I think obviously a divorce is something that's very emotionally draining and there's lots of things that takes your attention. But I think it's very important to really sit down with a professional regarding your financial planning and understanding exactly what your new circumstances are and putting in place a new plan, something fresh, something that you have helped to sculpt and make sure that that's a new goal to your objectives, and it just takes that time to realign yourself from a financial perspective with what you would like to have in your future.
All right. Thanks for joining us on this episode, Eric.
Thanks a lot, Jimmy. Much appreciated.
And that was Eric Jordan, who is a certified financial planner at Crew Invest. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure to follow us for the latest episodes, share the podcast with your friends, and download our episodes.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Money Rules Podcast. To listen to more, go to moneyweb.co.za or the Moneyweb app and follow Moneyweb News for daily updates. Moneyweb, your trusted source for business and investment insights.